Hey YouTube, anybody that's been watching this channel or following it probably has been watching for some updates on the Yamaha Bolt. This is a 2014 Yamaha Bolt R-Spec, and today's project ended up kind of out of the blue after a couple of comments that got me looking into it further. It's a known issue with Yamaha, at least in the 2014 that I know of, that they would have their front fenders mounted on 180 degrees opposite. And for the first 2 years that I owned this bike, I thought, no, that doesn't make sense. It looked good. You know, it was all clean, smooth lines, very similar. A little bit sharper with the correct way you'll see here with the bend. But it all looked generally pretty good. So I thought, no, they're just saying that. Until I started looking into it a little bit further this morning. And so this is going to be a little explanation on the differences and then how I did it. Now it's a verbal because I've already switched it around. I didn't think the project would be this big, so I didn't videotape it. So the differences, to see if your Yamaha Bolt was on backwards, we'll call it, okay? So our first part here, one side from the center will be longer than the other. The way mine was mounted was the longer side went forward, which is stated to be backwards. I've since changed it. So the longer side would then go, the correct way would go back. Differences, this is the correct way. I keep saying that, but just so you know. Real basic measurements from the fork itself to the front on the correct way, it is stated to be about 9.5, 10 inches approximate, okay? So what is the difference? So if we go the other way, well, this won't stay quite there, so just take my word on this one. From the fork back, we're looking at about a foot, so an inch, inch and a half, whatever. It's a little bit lopsided, and that's for a reason, for cosmetic as well as functionality to block some of the stuff from hitting the engine block and such. Okay. So this is how you do it. Now that my rambling's done, I wanted it to be changed. I thought it would be easy by reading some people's forum comments about all I had to do was let air out of the tires and pull it off. This is how you have to do it from what my experience was, unless you want to chew the heck out of your paint on the fender, because these are all solid mounts. They don't have any forgiveness, and some of the brackets, you're going to end up fumbling it, jamming it in there, scratching up on the top. Just put the little extra time in, and this is the best way I have found to do it, okay? First of all, simple car jack. I won't show you everything in the picture, it's right down here. Put the car jack underneath with a block of wood so you don't jam into or gouge anything out of the engine block towards the front. Jack it up, lift it up. Careful if you're gonna do this alone. I've done it alone twice now. Just be very careful that it stays balanced, otherwise next thing you know, you've got body damage and gotta get something else repaired. Lift it up, and then end up blocking it. So underneath it, I ended up taking, basically all I needed some old blocks and put it on top and slid it underneath. What that ended up doing is taking the weight off. So it kept it balanced, so you didn't need the kickstand anymore. And then the front wheel was off the ground. Because to do this project, the front wheel does need to be off the ground. Because you need to drop the wheel, which is not as scary as some think that maybe aren't as mechanically inclined. This is what you need to do. Again, jack it up. Put it in the block, just so you've got about maybe about that much space, maybe even a little bit less, all that you need the front wheel off the ground to start. Okay, so once it's balanced, it's up on the blocks. Some of this, it all should be in metric. However, I had a 3/4 inch wrench that worked out just fine. I didn't even get close to stripping anything, so those that comment, there will be somebody, but whatever. This is for your basic garage and such. Okay, on this side of the wheel, I'm just gonna point. So we've got these two set screws need to be loosened first, okay? Once it's jacked up, you take a 6mm Allen wrench. That will loosen those two up. All weight is off of the front. You don't need to worry about it, okay? So we've got that off and loosened. We can make sure we can get it loose. It's righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. That same applies on this side. What I ended up doing that I would suggest is on the other side where you have your brake calipers, okay? I would suggest taking that off as well. The size wrench that I ended up using for that is a 12mm, and again, that's right here and there. So before you get started, again, jack it up, and then you can loosen those two set screws. Take off your brake calipers, not a big deal again. Just loosen up, right, this one and that one, take them all the way out, and that'll just hang, okay? So what you do then is once you've got this off, it just seems to be easier, whether it's mandatory or not. What you can do is you take, and it should be metric, but the closest equivalent I had of the size was a 3/4 inch. At that point, what you do is put down on the side and righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Okay, so these need to be loosened first before you can twist that out. With all the weight off of it, you have it upright, and you take that until all the threads are out of this side, and you just slide that shaft out, okay? From there, the front wheel comes off. Again, the caliper from the brake is just hanging down. All right, we've got the front wheel out. In this case, what you can do then, or what you should do, is you'll have that whole front section out. What I had is you take that same 12 millimeter that you use for the brakes, and then you can take out all 4 bolts on each side. So excuse me, 1, 2, 3, 4. I ended up taping some rags around so I wouldn't scratch the paint. Because the wheel is out of there, this front fender needs to go down, because if you look here, it's wider. You cannot shift it up, not just because of brake calipers, but because of forks itself. This carefully needs to go down. Once the wheels drop, this whole shaft is out, it can go down, and then you can switch it the 180 degrees, put it on the correct way, if this project is important to you. Okay, so wheel's still out, vehicle is still up. We carefully turn it the 180 degrees, all the way out the bottom, and then carefully, if you're worried about scratches like I was, shift it all the way back up into its current place. The brackets itself, they'll all line up again, and you just put it back in. All 4 holes are equally spaced, so it'll go 180 degrees each way, and that's part of the reason some say that Yamaha has some of them backwards out of the factory. This one, I believe, was one of them after looking at it further. Looks much more sporty, and looks much more correct, and seems to offer maybe an extra inch or 2 of protection from generalized debris flying up against the engine block, okay? So there's that little ramble again. I digress, but once that's up there and you tighten the 4 again, you snug up all 4 just the way that they were with it in the correct orientation, shorter up in front, longer in back. What you can do then is, while it's still blocked up, you would then raise it up into the correct correct position, and you can put your front drive axle or shaft back through carefully, and at that point then you can put that back in. I ended up only doing it lightly tight, I guess, by that, because I don't want to mess it up while it's up on the blocks of wood. Just nice and snug. Put the brake calipers back on using that 12 millimeter wrench, and then I ended up, well, it was nice and snug, to the hand. I did get it off the blocks and put it down on the ground so I could crank on it a little bit harder, and then I torqued it down. So I did, again, torque that down, then I switched over and did the 2 6 millimeter Allen wrench, and then I worried about the brakes. And again, everything, your torque specifications in different user manuals and such, and you can find them on the internet. So not an exciting video, but what you need to do, the reason I made this video is because I was reading on forums, different people said all you had to do is let the air out of the tire and you could squeeze it, and then you could get the bolts out. The end result is the same that I found. Because it gets wider here, the whole fender has to go out all the way, and it gets wider this way, so you can't slide it out each way. Has to go down. And again, I even tried with different clamps to squeeze the tire. I tried to flip them around to spread the forks once I didn't quite take the tire off. None of that was working, and I actually caused a small scratch doing it that way. Back thankfully hidden this way. There's my 2-cent video. I hope it helps somebody else that wants to do the project. I know it would have been more helpful to do it like a professional when you're videotaping as you're doing the whole project, but if I would have known this, I would have saved a lot of swearing. Have a great day, everybody.